We have seen how to display the image, how to make various sections, how to display the text. Now we are going to see the most important UI component in the mobile domain. In iOS it's called UITableView. In other platform, some says it's a list view, some people say it's a content view. So basically this component plays a vital role in the mobile domain. Mobile screens are very small, and to display the huge amount of data we need cluster of view, like say an example like contacts app. It's nothing but the contacts are displayed as a list, which is nothing but a table view. So understanding the UI table view and how it relates to the model will cover a lot of use cases in a mobile domain. So basically cluster of data needs to map to a cluster of view, and if you crack this pattern of making cluster of data mapping to the cluster of view, you have done the entire mobile application domain. So you'll be able to make apps on any domain if you understand this pattern. So this pattern or this component is the most important part of any mobile domain. So I'm sorry, it's a part of any mobile application language you use to make the app. So we're gonna start with simple table. We will copy the previous project. We're gonna use project 2 till the last topic of the course. So we will be creating table view component inside apps view controller. Basically we have displayed UI label in view controller, image view in gallery view controller, and now it's time for us to investigate in the UI table view component. So whenever we learn any new UI component, we try to map to its corresponding model. So here the model becomes NS array. Like UI label and UI image view, we have a direct association of NS string and UI image as a property to the UI component, but there is nothing as a property inside UI table view which takes NS array. So the mapping of NS array to the UI table view needs to be handled manually by us, and that's what we're gonna demonstrate in this session. Now UI table view is an array of UI table view cells whose index starts from 0. Similarly, NS array is an array of objects whose object index starts from 0. So there is a common pattern like index 0 and index 0. So mapping of this cluster of data like NS array becomes far better to use in UI and UI table view. So we won't be using any dictionary, we won't be using any set, but we'll be gonna use NS array. Now as conventional, we're gonna declare UI table view. We will declare the method, we will implement it, and we will call that method in init. Now whenever you use UI table view, you need to confirm two protocols: UI table view data source delegate and UI table view delegate. Now data will be inflated in UI table view dynamically. So suppose you have 100 rows, you have 100 contacts, and on a screen at a time you can see 8 contacts only. So is it wise to create 100 cells, or we should reuse the same 8 cells to display 100 contacts? Exactly. Second option is far more optimized, right? So the reusability thing you don't have to worry about. That's taken care by the iOS. Oh wow, that's very cool, right? So in order to get that dynamics of a single, now it's not always that user will scroll downwards only. It can scroll upwards also. In middle of the table, you might have to go above. So the cell which will come inside the visible frame is not sure. It will all depends upon the user interaction. So in order to, when you have a dynamics coming in picture, we use protocols. It's an event based callback, which is similar to the interface concept of Java, or you can say a pure virtual class concept of callback mechanism in C++. So we will first see whether there are any required method. So I first see UITableView delegate, and I find it's an informal protocol, so I don't have to worry about it. Then I'll see UITableView data source, and here I find it's a formal protocol because it has required method. So if I confirm this protocol, I have to implement these two methods. So I blindly implement these two methods right now. Now, before we start implementing this method, I have to write the 4 rules of UITableView. So I say table of apps, UITableView allow, init with frame, so direct make, I say 10,10. I have defined the frame, and I say self.view add subview. Now, if there are two protocols to confirm, there will be two delegates to set. Like in Java, we have say two interface we have implementing. That means you have set two different listeners, each listener corresponding to respective interface. So similarly, we will be setting up the delegate. So this is for UITableView delegate, and this one is for UITableView data source. Now when you confirm UITableView data source, you have no option but you have to implement these two methods. Now why these two methods have been given importance of required? Number of rows in section. Now the table view is attached to the UI scroll view because you need to display cluster of data, right? So you need a scroller. Now for scroll view, you have to set the content size so that it comes to know how long you have to scroll. So in order to make it scrolling more optimized with table, in iOS we don't have a column or multi columns. So a table has only one column and multi rows. A person can show multi column by bluffing. Okay, so your cell you design such a way that it shows the user that it has a multi columns. So depending upon number of rows and into height of each row will give you the content height to the OS, so that the scroll view knows how much content he has to scroll. So say it's ns integer, so it's like hash defined int. So I say I return 10, and now the second is most important method again. When a cell is about to come into the frame, the table view needs that cell. So you have to provide that cell depending upon the index at which the cell is coming. So that index is defined by the index path. Okay. So in order to make the reusable code, I would say the reusable cell, we have to follow some standard steps. So first I'll say UITableView cell. I'll create cell and I'll say return my cell. First we have to check whether cell exists in the memory by dequeuing the with reusable identifier, and I say my cell. If there is a cell which has an identifier called my cell, the OS will try to use that. If memory doesn't have any cell with an identifier my cell, we need to create the cell with that identifier. So the golden rule says that all the cells belonging to one table will have same identifier. So if I don't find any cell, I'll say create UITableView cell allow. Now init with frame won't be relevant method to use to create the cell, because as we are aware of, table view do not have concept of columns. So the width of each cell will be the width of the table. The first cell will have an x and y coordinate as the origin of the table, and height depends upon you. If you don't provide the head for each cell, the system takes the default height. So the setting of the frame is internally handled by the table view. So we go for another option called init with style. So UITableView style has various enum. Now depending upon that, you can select whichever pattern you want. So if you select any style, it will give you the cell layout with some component attached to it, and you can set those component property as a content for your cell. So we're going to start with default, and we're going to use the same identifier, my cell. Now for default, cell has a label attached to it with the property name called text label, and we know every label has a property called text. So if I assign text value to this label, I am not indirectly providing the content to the cell. Now with this, let's try and run the program. So I found that all the rows contain the same content, because for each cell I'm providing the same content. So in order to provide a dynamic content or the distinct content, we're going to use string with format concept, and I say %d index path dot row. The index path contains the row index, so which starts from 0. So depending upon the row index, you can distinguish, or you can come to know which cell is about to come in the frame of the table, and accordingly you can set the content. So for time being, we are setting Priyank. So if you see, the data is getting displayed differently for different cell. So in order to differentiate between the which cell, we use index path dot row. So we'll be setting up the coordinates properly so that we get the proper result. So now it looks cool, right? Now our intention is not to provide the data this way. Okay, as of now you can think that I can use a switch case, and depending upon the index path dot row, I can provide the data to the cell text label. But our intention is to provide data using NS array. So let's declare the model NS array. So I say names. Now if you noticed, we never created NS string globally. Neither we have created UI image globally in previous example, because NS string and UI image object were locally used. So we were declaring locally. But in this case, array will be used globally. So we are declaring array as a global. So before I create view, I have to create array. So I say NS array, array with objects, and I'll pass the string because I want to create array of string. So I say Priyank, name up infotech. So I've created array of 3 objects, 3 string objects, and we have to pass nil to indicate end of the array. Now number of elements in an array will be number of cells, so I say names.count. Now instead of setting this value, I can extract the string from the array by saying object index and pass index path.row. So if 0th cell is about to come, I will be extracting 0th object from the names array, and similarly, depending upon the index path.row value, I'll be extracting the respective object from the names array. Now this is how we map the array into the table view inside the controller. So if we run, we want to have, wow, now that's called MVC, the model meets view in controller. We have achieved this mapping. Now let's take a complicated example like an app store list view, where you have icons of the app, you have the publisher name, the price and everything. So it's a complicated cell. We don't have a ready-made template for that. So we'll be creating our own cell. Okay, so we'll be going one step ahead. So we have completed this exercise. We're going to move to a new exercise called custom tables. So I want to close this project and create a new project. We'll go to this session progress folder, create a new folder, say custom table, copy previous exercise project and open. Now we'll be discussing now I will be using some sort of predefined data so that my exercise or tutorial become more compact and easy to understand. The first thing, I have to create a model, a pure model class which holds the data structure. So we're going to start with model, then we're going to go on view, and then we'll write the program in controller. So I create a new file, I say Objective-C class, and I create a subclass of NS object. I say app model. I say next, and I say create. Now inside the app model, I'll copy some data. So I'm creating a set of properties. Each property will be strong, not the assign, as we are using ARC. We no longer use, and I say str app title, str app publisher. So I have to have a data structure for title. I need app publisher, I need price, I need description, release, and app icon. Now as we are using Xcode 5.0, we don't need to synthesize anything. The application level only it will get synthesized. And with the use of ARC, the opposite of strong, we call release or nil, will be automatically returned when this object goes out of the memory. Now we need to create a class which says provider class, app provider model, which basically gonna provide the array to the controller. So I say app provider model, and I say create. Now this is a main class. Controller will has a relationship with this particular class, and this class will basically provide the cluster of data. Now in this case we're going to use hard-coded values because but you'll be seeing this particular provider class in a future series of the iOS application with us, that this particular provider will get connected to the database through web services, get the data, process it, and give you the array of data. So the pattern still remains the same. In further courses, we're going to see this app provider X as a mediator for the database. We'll pull the data from this databases and give it to you locally. So every pattern is same. Get a provider will get a cluster of data from the repository and provide that data to the controller. Controller will then provide that data to the view. So we're going to create two methods which will return ns array. I say get nimup apps and I say get nimup games. So these two methods will provide the respective array. So I'll be using, now I need the array of these apps, images of the apps and the games. So I go to desktop in the given folder, it's an app icon, so I add it. Now this icon contains the sequential of the apps icon and the game icon, and we'll get some code from here. So I'll be using this code to get the follow. Now basically I want to do copy paste because it's just the dummy data, so it will pointless if we create now. I have 14 apps in this use case. We just create the app model. Depending upon the switch case, we are just providing them the images, and after the switch case we add the model to the app, and then I say return array apps. Simple. Similarly, we're gonna have one more method which returns array games. So I say it's just the for loop to match that icon image name. So depending upon this we provide the data. So my provider is ready. Now it's time for me to create a view class. So model is ready. Now it's time for me to create a view. I need to create a custom cell. So a normal cell is of type UITableView cell. If I create my cell, it will be extending the UITableView cell. So I'll say app cell. So I say new file, check to see I need a subclass of UITableView cell, and I say app cell. Now this particular will act as the blueprint of the cell. So we will be taking the direct code, 4 components to this cell. So we want to declare them as strong as they are part of the ARC project, and then we will see .m. So it has init function implemented. Now with ARC coming picture or new, we need to create self dot with new export synthesize is written by default, and in order to make sure that proper accessor method gets called, we use self dot. So I'm just creating a blueprint of my cell. Now there's the most important part of the arc, automatic reference count. Automatic reference count says it will write the releases at the proper places. Agreed. Now as you see, these components are global, so the arc will write release inside the dialog of the app cell. Absolutely fine. But if you see the rule, alloc increments the retain count by 1, add subview increases the retain count by 2. So if I run this app, it will run properly. When a DAlloc of app cell will get called, the ARC will write alloc opposite release. Bingo. So it did its work. But the retain count of this particular component, image view app icon, will reduce from 2 to 1. Now you will say, why not arc is writing release at the end of the if condition? Now if you see, this image view app icon, label app publisher are all globally declared variables. So if the variables are globally declared in .h, they have to get released only when a DAlloc of that particular class get called. So alloc opposite release will get called by the arc, but who will write remove from superview? So even if you run this program properly, it will get executed properly, but it is not memory optimized. So if app cell goes out of the memory, we need that all its components which are attached to the app cell should also remove from the memory. If the view components are not removed, the associated model components will not get removed, and it will lead to a huge memory consumption. So when I say arc, it's very good, but it doesn't cover all the memory management scenarios as we discussed. So we're gonna implement DL. So arc help us to reduce a lot of code, but you have to be very cautious to inject the code where it's needed. So here we're gonna check if self.app icon is not nil. I will say remove the and will assign app icon to nil, making sure that the release gets called properly. So our code incremented the retain count of this component by 2. Our code itself have reduced those component retain count by 2. Now your code is memory optimized. Now this is very important in terms of memory optimization, because cells are widely used in tables throughout the application. So if your table view is very much optimized, your entire MVC, which holds cluster of data to the cluster of view, is optimized. So most important part of your architect. Now let's come to the simplest part. Now there's a junction. The junction meets the both rows. So it has first row says app model, and the second row which says app cell. So both the rows are input. I say apps, and I won't be using this variable now. I will be creating app provider. So instead of importing app model, I'll say app provider, because this provider will give me my respective array. I'll say apps equal to provider get name of apps, and then I'll say apps.count. Now you don't need to release the provider as part of the AR arc. At the end of this method, provider will be released, and we already got the apps. Now first thing, I don't want to create UITableView cell. Instead of, I have to create the app cell, and I have to typecast. So things are still the same. Only instead of creating a standard cell, I create the custom cell. So when I say init style, the control will go here. My template gets created, and I can then use. So before I start inflating the cell, I need to extract my model. So I say app, typecast to app model. I say apps object at index path.row, and then I say myself dot image view icon dot image equal to app dot app icon. I say myself dot apprise dot text equal to app dot str apprise. So if you see, the code is written with a proper MVC. Model meets view in cell. Oh, sorry, model meets view in controller. Now, if you run this app, let's see what we get. Oh my god, the output is not as we expected, because when you design the cell, you design with some height. You were expecting the height to be 80 pixels, and by default the cell heights are not 80 pixels. So I need to confirm some optional protocol. So inside your UI table view delegate, you have a protocol called height for row at index path. So we will be implementing this method, and I say return 70 pixels. Oh wow. If you see, price is getting cut down, right? So inside your app cell, you can reduce your, or you can move your price to 20 pixel in your X direction, and you'll find it's coming proper. But you are seeing only one section of the apps. I want title to the section. So I again go to the data source delegate. There's something called title for header in section. So I copy this method, implement this optional method, and I say return name of apps and run the application. Wow, that's amazing. Simply amazing. But I have one more section called name of games. So a table view is an array of sections, and each section is an array of cells. By default, a table view contains one section. So I need two sections. Now to inflate two sections, I need two arrays. So I will say games. I'll inflate with through provider the games array. I say games provider get name of games. I need to tell table view that you have two sections. So there's something called number of section. So I'll say number of section return 2. Now depending upon the section, I need to return the respective count. Section index starts from 0 and this way we go. Same logic will apply here also. Depending upon the section, you will index the respective array. So if it's section index path dot section. So index path contains section. So index path contains section and the row. So if section is 0, you want to index apps. If section is 1, you want to index it. Similarly, you want to have different title for different section. So you want to have Nimup apps for section 0 and Nimup games for section 1. That's one. You get Nimup apps and you get Nimup games. Wow, that's amazing. So you got cluster of data. Now if you want to set the background color of the cell as the same as the background color, let's see. Wow, isn't it looks cool? But white looks much better, right? So we're gonna go with a default color. And it looks cool, flawless. The next step we have to see how to get the interactivity on the cell. So for that we have a optional method called didSelect row at index path. So this is a method which we have to implement, didSelect row at index path. So depending upon the index path, we can extract. So first we'll see nslog. Let's see whether this method gets called or not. So when you select, it gets called, and it also send you the index path. So depending upon the index path dot section, we're gonna extract the data structure from the array and then pass it to a new controller. So if I click on this, the detail page should come, which displays the content on a detail page. So in order to do that, your view should be able to navigate to a different controller, but your view is navigation disabled. Now the next exercise we'll see how to make our views navigation enabled. So we stop at this point in this exercise and we'll move to the new exercise. Now, inside session progress, we'll create a new folder saying navigation demo, and we'll copy the previous project in the navigation demo. Now in navigation demo, now the situation says what? Your wall has a key holder. Key holder contains the single hooks, but now the situation comes that a hook inside the key holder should contain the key holder. So that means it's an array of controllers. Tab bar controller is not the array of normal controllers. It should be an array of controllers. So the data structure is like array containing an array of controllers. When you have this architect enabled, you have a better mobile portal. So it's like on a website you have a menu bars. Each menu bar holds a sub menu, and depending upon the sub menu, it goes to a particular section. So when such type of apps needs to be created, you need to design a tab bar controller at the base level, and a tab bar controller will contain the navigation controller. So we need to make some changes at the app delegate level. So out here you need to create a UI navigation controller, say subcontroller, and each navigation controller will be initialized with the respective tab controller, because navigation controller is a mutable array of controller, but it needs base controller to be initialized. Now, as we know, it's a navigation controller which will be associated with tab bar controller. So we'll be setting the navigation controller property of tab bar item, not the tab controller, and we'll run the app. And you will see a navigation bar is added on top. Now we need to set the title for the navigation controller. So I say navigation item bar dot top item dot title equal to tab title, and we have to change the sizes of the controller. Now that's fine. You will find that controller has been displaced, right? Now this is because your tab bar controller gets created initially, right? So we'll say reduce, and we'll see apps getting created, and we'll increase the height of our navigation controller, sorry, of our table view controller. Oh wow. So say 420, and with some try and error we get a better output, right? It's very simple. Now when I click, I need to navigate, so I need a new controller. So I'll create a new controller. I say new file, Objective-C, I say UI view controller, app details view controller. So create. Now I need to create my own constructor out here, because I need to inflate this particular controller view with the app model. So I say init with app model, and I'll implement this constructor out here. I declare some variables for my view controller. I've declared some UI component, and in my init function I'll be declaring the title. So declared as a model, because the code uses model. Okay, so everything's set down properly. So we don't have any BG for this screen. We're gonna set some background color as white, and we'll be assigning the data. Now I need to communicate this controller with the new controller. So I need to create the controller class. Now in this method I'll be creating the detail controller object. Now depending upon the index path.section, I'll initialize detail controller with their respective model. So I can use this concept here also. So I am extracting the data depending upon the section, and I say detail equal to app detail controller alloc init with app model, and I say app. Now as your controllers are navigation enabled, you can say self.navigationController push view controller and say we want animation. That's it. So when I click, I go. Now if it displays up, so we just need to play around with some coordinates. So I say 110, 70, 20, and run your app. So I've displayed some content, and wow, we got a proper app. Now this is called Uitextview. So we have to have a scrollable textual data. Use Uitextview instead of UI label. Wow, properly done, right? Oh wow, we could able to create our own app well within the time. That's great. We were creating app with display text, images, cluster of data using an array, navigating onto the detailed page. Too cool. Now the app runs fine on the simulator. Now there's a time for us to deploy this app on the device and finally on the App Store. So let's close this project, and before we go to the deployment process, we need to understand how to make the app compatible with the iPad and other screens, resolution type of devices like iPad, iPhone 4, 4S, 5 and on.